go back to your question, Hyrox is a sport because there are so many more tactics. You're hearing that from someone who won in Hong Kong by pure tactics, man. You watch the women Elite 15 run and race, and then you watch the men. And I'm the first to say they are totally, completely different races. I know for a fact that a lot of the male competitors or in my race, there's a lot of let's just go out as hard as possible and see if we can hold on. That's the best thing about Hyrox. It has created a lot of people to be more engaged with their training because there's a goal at the end of it. And that's the thing that we should be focusing on more than anything.
Welcome to Abnormal, the podcast for normal people who want to do abnormal things. Today we have another Hyrox special, joined by the other Australian champion, James Kelly. JK, welcome to the pod.
Pete, thanks for having me. Apologies we couldn't make this work face-to-face, but mate, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, hey, it's all right. We got one Aussie on the pod.
That's
so
right.
we can do one pre, one post event, which is fine.
Yeah, fantastic. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. We had some really good sort of feedback from the episode with Joanna. Obviously, the weekend was a huge success for her, for you, for Australians as a whole. So we thought, obviously with your success and it seems like I've seen your face everywhere, all over social media since Hyrox. I'm not sure if that's just the algorithm or because you won. But it's good to do this episode because you've got, when is it, Melbourne next week?
We've got Melbourne next week. I'm not actually going down, I've decided. But in the grand scheme of things, it's great to finish off the year with an Australian Melbourne event, mate. I know I think I got 35 athletes actually racing. So yeah, it's going to be a great event.
Are you going to go down anyway to sort of show face or?
Mate, I was going to, but I've decided, Georgie, my partner, and I decided not to, and that's just on more so on the idea that I've been traveling quite a bit, and I'm about to go to Vegas in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking at the bigger picture. I know it's just a 2-hour trip, but it's not just a 2-hour trip as well. It's getting out of my routine and that's the most important thing right now for my training and preparation for the next race.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's draining, right? Like, it's not, as you say, it's not just a 2-hour trip. If you go to a Hyrox event, it's not like you can go incognito. It's like the celebrities in LA on the catwalk or something. It's a mob. And that was proved in Hyrox in Hong Kong, right? When you won, Joanna won. Joanna was texting me the next day and I was like, where are you? Where are you? Come support me. You said you'd support my race. And she was like, oh, I literally was outside for 2 hours taking photos with people, which is great. But you're right. It's not, you can't just go to a chilled Hyrox event if you're someone like yourself.
And look, I'm the first to say I love that. I love being the face of Australia right now, and I'm very proud to say that, and also very humbled. But I love engaging with every other athlete that's there. But you're right, it's not just about rocking up and either racing myself or being a part of it. It's very mentally taxing. And we can get into it, but the little 1%ers for me are the things that have created what I've been able to do the last couple of races. So I've just had to say no to a few things, so to speak, and
Yeah.
Melbourne's one of them.
I mean, I know that firsthand, man. And, I was the first to say that I was gutted when you wouldn't come on the podcast the week before the race. And then as soon as you won it, I was like, well, fair enough. The guy knows what he's talking about.
And for the listeners, just to give some context, Pete reached out to me a couple of weeks before coming to Hong Kong about jumping on the pod, and I was very tempted, but I've created a rule, or I've got a rule with myself that I don't do anything before a race, especially the week of. I don't do any publicity.
Mm,
I don't do much in the first place before a race, let alone podcasting and talking about the race and whatnot. Because it's not because I need to dial into just my own thoughts and the race itself. It's just a matter of just um, spending the energy that I need to spend and leaving the rest. And that's what I've been able to learn as I go. I'm a very structured, routine orientated person, and if I can stick to that as much as possible before a race, things are probably going to go well, or touch wood go well, and hence why I couldn't jump on that podcast with you. But I'm glad that you understood, Pete. I
of
appreciate
course,
that.
of course. Hey,
And
as an
here
ex
we are
pro athlete
now,
myself, I know what it's like to have your own game day routines as it is, and
pretty
you've got to
much.
do what
Yeah.
works. You've got to do what works because this is these are huge competitions. The sport is growing at an insane rate. You are on an incredible run of form right now, and yeah, the Hyrox Hong Kong competition was a huge one, and you've really laid down a marker now for the rest of the competitions leading up to Worlds. Mate, you touched on there about routine. I'm a sucker for a routine. Anyone that follows my short form content knows that I love a good morning routine. Mate, can you talk us through what your sort of morning routine looks like?
Yeah, my morning routine's pretty simple and um, simple but effective, but also it I don't stray from it. Georgie and I wake up at the same time every morning.
What
And
time?
that's 5:30. 5:30 our alarm goes off, and I go straight to the kitchen and I try and drink as quickly as possible in the space of half an hour, probably like a liter of water. That's my first go-to, is just water. And then I make myself a coffee and go for a walk.
Mm,
I'm very lucky where we live, we're literally 100 meters from the beach here on the Sunshine Coast, and I go for a walk. I do open my phone and start some work whilst I'm walking, but the first hour of my day is walking with a coffee and in the sun and going back home and then getting some good food in me. So that's the first couple of hours before I get going with my training.
that's a very wholesome morning routine. I'm sure a lot of people listening would love to have something similar to that.
It's really nice, and I've learnt the power of one, waking up at the same time every morning. Two, not diving into caffeine, not diving into stimulant straight away. I mean, I'll be honest, this morning I probably had my coffee only 15 minutes after after I woke up, but I do make sure that I down water before caffeine, and then obviously just get my body moving by just going for a walk is really, really essential.
Have you always been like this? Have you always been this like disciplined and structured in your ways?
Yeah, yeah, it's something, if I think about it, Pete, it's something that I've always been like, even when I was young, my mum and dad still tell the stories of when I used to play cricket at the age of 10 years of age. I used to take it so seriously to the point where Friday night would come around and I would lay out all my cricket gear, pack my cricket bag, lay out my whites, lay out my hat and my sunscreen, and I'd be ready to go Friday night to wake up the next morning, and I'd have the same breakfast. I would get to the cricket match early. I would want to do this. I want to do that beforehand, and that just has grown to what I do now, I guess. And not only cricket, but I was able to play a lot of sports growing up, and I've always been very routine orientated, which has its pros and cons, Pete. But I wouldn't be here now talking to you probably I wasn't this way inclined.
I think it's when I talk about routine and discipline with people, and even to my followers when I create content myself, it's in my belief, and I think it might be the same with you as well. It's not necessarily you're not looking for that one big change in life that's going to be your big break, but the thing that routine and discipline gives you is compounded effects. So right now
Sure.
you're seeing the benefits, and you have been for the last few months, and hopefully the next few months, and long may it continue. You're seeing the benefits of these compounded one percenters, and maybe not even one percenters, actually 0.1 percenters. Because you're at such a high level of elite sport now that if it's a one percenter, then that's quite a high margin. You're looking at even more incremental changes than that, but routine and discipline will compound this over time, and then a year, 5 years time, that's when you start seeing the benefits. And it feels like you're in that sweet spot now where things are coming together, and you're in this era now of form.
Definitely, man. Definitely, and just on that compound effect, right? You know, the Hong Kong race that I was able to win, it wasn't necessarily to do with the 8 week block and perfect preparation of the 8 weeks that I was able to tick off. It was probably the 6 months of preparation leading into that 8 weeks that was able to give me um, the foundation to go into that 8 weeks, to do the 8 weeks pretty well, to then tick off the win in Hong Kong. So what I'm saying is that compound effect is so true, mate. And again, I preach this to all my athletes. It's not about what you've just done the last 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. It's what you've done, you know, years and years on end. And I was lucky to grow up playing anything and everything, mate. And that's the reason. That's the sole reason why I'm here today, doing what I'm doing in the high rock space. It's not my threshold pace right now or my ability to flush out lactic acid quicker than other people. It's because I've been trained and programmed for years and years on end um, in a lot of different and varied sports. Um, Yeah, so yeah, that compound effect is very, very effective when it comes to routine.
And when you're talking about these team sports, as you grow up, I'm really interested to know at what point did you discover that you were really, really good at this type of sport like high rocks and anything physical? Because you're mentioning cricket there, and I'm sure there's a multitude of other sports as well. What I found with these sports is they have a lot of variables in. So there's that sort of decision making element. Even things like the weather come into it. So there's so many things that can go wrong, and that's what I love about team sports or other sports, is that before a game, before an event, you don't know if you're going to have the best game of your life or the worst game of your life. It's almost an equal chance that one or the other can happen. Whereas when you go into an event like High Rocks, supposedly, now this isn't always the case, but supposedly, that if you've done the prep and you've not gone out of routine in the build up to that, then you should be on for a relatively accurate time based off what your training has been. So my question, long-winded question, is at what stage did you realize that you were really good and this is the path you should go down other than team sports?
Yeah, Pete, I think early on I knew that I was good at a lot of sports. I played cricket growing up. I ran and I did a lot of long distance running and cross country, track and field. I played Aussie rules football.
Mm.
Um, and I was always good, but if I'm being completely honest, I wasn't, in my eyes, I wasn't good enough. I was never actually good enough. And I'm saying that from what I remember telling myself back back then, and also I never made a lot of representative sides, or I never made the state teams. I was always just shy of them, and due to that, it created naturally this desire to work hard. And I remember uh, when I first started properly running, I was 12 or 13 years of age when I first started like really tapping into my running capacity and doing a lot of cross country and track stuff. I really gravitated to running because 9 times out of 10, it was the person who worked the hardest would reap the rewards. It wasn't necessarily the skill of, oh, he's a natural born runner. Um, that only got so far, even at 12, 13 years of age. And I just remember going deep down that hole of, okay, here's some sports that I've just been introduced to that doesn't matter about skill. It's a matter about how hard you work. So you know what? I'm gonna work. I'm gonna work 10 times as hard as the other boys here. And slowly but surely, I was lucky enough to have a really good running coach in my high school, running career, and he he saw that in me, and he really lent to, or he allowed me to lean towards that, and he allowed me to work hard. He allowed me to be aggressive by doing more. Um, and if it wasn't for that type of mindset growing up, again, I wouldn't be here. But to go back to your question, yeah, I was actually never quite good enough in my eyes playing these sports. It was just when it turned into how hard you can work. That's when my eyebrows got raised, and I was like, okay, here we go. I
Mm.
can work harder than you, and I know I can. And I'll be honest with you. I've learnt the power of not only that, working hard with Hyrox, but smart hard work is what I always talk about now. Is the most important, and again, like it's the reason why I'm here now.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and it's probably a point that would put off a lot of people to join a competitive sport like high rocks when it is, if you were to tell someone, okay, the harder you work, the more rewards you're going to get. That sounds pretty basic. But when you're talking about elite sport, I know a lot of people that would actually scare them because it would expose them. It would expose them because some people prefer to rely on skills and talents and abilities, which you can rely on more in things like ball sports, like rugby,
Yep.
cricket, Aussie rules, whatever. Whereas something like high rocks is, as you say, the harder you work, the more rewards you're going to get. You could say just like in life, right? But there are a lot of people that say, can you then call it a sport like you can call cricket a sport? Because the variables are a lot fewer in something like high rocks than they are in those type of sports. What do you think of when people say that?
I think the first thing I'll say about that is I've learnt that it's not just about hard work, Hyrox. And I prefaced it before. It's about smart hard work. There's definitely a line, and especially in our world we live in now, that everyone, I feel as if everyone, Pete, thinks that more is better. More is more, and more is better. More means that you're going to get fitter. And that's not necessarily what I'm saying here. So I just wanted to preface that it's understanding what your hard work means, but also understanding that you got to do that smartly. You don't want to overtrain. You don't want to overdo it either. And the only way you can do that, in my eyes, in my opinion, is to have people around you that you can bounce off, coaches, support network, to really understand if you are going overboard with hard work, right? Um, I'm very lucky as well, Pete, to be working with um, one of the best coaches that I've ever had the privilege to be coached by or know in the first place. And to kind of go back to your question, Hyrox is a sport because there are so many more tactics in play than what people think.
Mm.
And you're hearing that from someone who won on in Hong Kong by pure tactics, man. By
Talk
pure
us through that.
tactics.
Talk us through that. I want to know if you're allowed
Yeah,
to divulge. What
absolutely.
were your tactics going into the race in Hong Kong?
Uh, it's um it's an interesting one, mate, because you watch the women elite 15 run and race, and then you watch the men, and I'm the first to say they are totally, completely different races. I can only talk from my experience and my experience as one of the male competitors. I know for a fact that a lot of the male competitors or in my race, there's a lot of let's just go out as hard as possible and see if we can hold on.
Hmm.
I'll be honest, I used to be like that. I used to race like that. Um,
Well,
the
some could
thing
say
that
that
I've
you did in Hong Kong, man, because the first K you got what, like a 320K or something, entering the ski like in first place, was it?
I it was
So you could
uh
argue you've gone out pretty hard there.
yeah, you could, but also um my response to that is, well, my game plan was to be on that first ski, but my game plan wasn't to be off the ski that first, and
Got
that's
it.
exactly what
Interesting.
happened as well, right? Yeah, I think to kind of go on from that, right, Pete, is I've learnt the power of really respecting what a Hyrox race is, and actually really respecting the volume of what a Hyrox race is, the amount of reps that you do in a Hyrox race or need to do to finish a Hyrox race. It's just incredible, let alone trying to do it at the speeds that anyone has to try and do, but let alone what we try to do at the elite level. Um, so from there, you've got to work to your own strengths and your own opportunities to get better. And what that means is I know my strength of running and the ability to run well off stations is my weapon. And due to that, I know for a fact that most of my stations are in and around that uncomfortable but controlled state. And the word threshold, that threshold zone, I'm never going over my threshold. Um, I can't talk for anyone else, but it feels like others are.
Mm.
Um, so tactically, going back to it, I I was always wanting to go. Oh, sorry, my tactic was to be on that first ski because I wanted to surprise the boys. And second of all, I knew for a fact that a couple of them were going to take off 5, 10, I think it was 12 seconds before me. And you know what? That was the that was the game plan. I was fine with that. And lo and behold, the race unfolded in which I was able to jump on the rower first again, and that was a tactical movement at the rower in which I was coming in second, but ended up taking Tim very, very late to jump on that rower. And I knew, again, Tim was going to come off the rower before me. But at at that time of the race, I was quietly confident that I was going to be able to close very well. Not knowing what Tim's fitness was going to be like, but I knew that I was going to be able to close very strong and secure the win. Um, Hyrox is more of a tactical race than what you think, and I think more and more people will start learning to understand how to play with your strengths versus
Mm.
really really relying on just going out hot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's very interesting because it's the first real insights into the tactical part of a Hyrox race that I've heard. Because when we spoke with Joanna, I mean, she's very new to the sport and she's killing it, obviously. But she was very much in the mindset of I just want to run my own race. She knows that her running is an absolute weapon. And she's been doing it for 4 months, so she really is just like learning every race. The insights you're giving us there are very, very specific and technical. And so it's really interesting. Whenever I've done a Hyrox, it's it's not really like that. I've done one which is one that I took really seriously with my best friend in Hong Kong, where we qualified for the World Championships in doubles, and that's when we got into a bit more of a tactical element in terms of like rotation on stations and things. But hearing it from the Elite 15 level, it's very interesting. And you're right, it does sound more like a sport when you talk like that. I want to know, when you're going around the race, you've obviously got an idea in your mind before you start about what you want the race to look like and what your tactics are. How much of it is you eyeing up your opposition and seeing where you are compared to them throughout the race versus this is my tactic, I'm just going to run my own race and see what the clock says at the end of it?
Yeah, it depends on how the race plays out, if I'm completely honest with you, Pete. In in Hong Kong, I'll be honest, as much as I just stated my tactics on being first to the ski, being okay with not being the first off, being first to the row, etc., etc., I was still running my own race, and if if I didn't, I wouldn't have won. Meaning, if I did worry about what others were doing, I wouldn't have won. So I'm so much, I'm so about making sure that I'm sticking to my plan. I'm just worrying about what I'm doing versus worrying about if the boys are like around me are gaining on me or not. But also the beauty of what we're doing compared to, I'll be honest, compared to any other Hyrox racer out there or anyone who is uh, uh, racing in any event in the world, sorry, a Hyrox event in the world, is that we're actually racing. It doesn't necessarily matter about time. And
Mm.
what that means is, just an example, I'd be still a happy man if I crossed that line in Hong Kong, the first place, and did a 59-minute. Like, I'd still be very happy because I won,
Yeah.
and I beat everyone, versus doing if I did a 55-minute but came second or third, well, I wouldn't be as happy, if that makes sense. So, it is tactic. It is about understanding where everyone is and how the race is unfolding. But I think the phrase to kind of sum it up is I try to stick to my lane. I try to stick in my lane and just go about my race the way I feel like is best to me to execute as well as possible.
Yeah, stay in your lane. I love it. And I think it's
Yeah.
a good balance, right? It's a good balance of seeing where the other guys are at versus, okay, I know what I'm capable of. I've done this enough times now. I back my training. So moving on from Hong Kong, then I know you had a big weekend because you also ran the mixed doubles the next day with
Yeah.
Georgie. Actually, before we move on, this is one thing that blows my mind every time I do a Hyrox weekend. And I'm normally on the mic, I'm emceeing, and I'm normally running one race. And I consider myself a relatively fit guy. But the number of people that will go back to back races in a Hyrox now, and they're just like normal people. But then I see you win the Elite 15s on Friday, do the mixed doubles with Georgie, same with Joanna, win the Elite 15 on Friday, do women's doubles the next day. And it's like, but you're not just doing it socially or casually. Like you came third or fourth in mixed doubles, you guys. Joanna won the women's doubles. And to me, I'm like, that's just insane. And that's for me, that's where it's like, okay, these guys are really just they're not built different, but their training has elevated them to a level that is truly elite.
I tell you what, Pete, halfway during that doubles with Georgie, I turned to her and I was like, why did we do this?
Well, I
I
mean, she
was,
was the
I
same,
was,
right?
I
She did
was,
singles and then
yeah,
did the
yeah, she
doubles.
was the same. So I'll be the first to say doing two Hyrox races in a weekend is very tough for anyone. Um, it's funny. I listened to your podcast with Joanna, and just on that topic though, um, I heard her talk about her training, or I think you asked, or you stated maybe your training seems harder than a Hyrox
Yeah,
race,
yeah.
or something along that line, and that's the sole point of what we do. Um, I'm lucky again to be working with my coach, and uh, I look at the volume that I do day to day, week to week. Um, oh, like one day is complete. Like yeah, it's just crazy the amount of volume and how hard our training is compared to just one Hyrox race. So I think that's the reason why we can back up pretty well.
Mate, talk us through that. Like, we'll move on from Hong Kong now. We've lived in the glory, and I'm sure you've already moved on, but I'm bringing us back there. I want to know because I follow you on social media, and it just seems like you are non-stop training. So, what is like a typical? I want to know what your typical day looks like, but then also I want to break that into the scale of a week to know like what your rest to work ratio looks like. So, what's your typical day?
I'll take you through the day that I just had. So it's 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday now, and I've finished my training for the day. Tuesday, Thursdays are my double threshold days. So normally a little bit more taxing, a little bit more intense.
What does double threshold mean?
So I'm doing a threshold session in the morning and then a threshold session in the afternoon.
And a threshold means just for everyone means that you're
Yep.
pushing yourself to the max.
So not necessarily, mate. So
Okay.
threshold for me and what I'm doing is pretty much running in the morning at my threshold pace, which is sub maximal, sub VO2 max. So it's just shy of that intensity that won't allow you to continue.
Got it.
Threshold threshold for the listeners and the viewers. Threshold means sustained effort. So it's an effort that you can sustain over time. I've done my lactate threshold tests, and I know exactly my paces for this. So, this morning, just an example, I had my threshold session, which consists of 8 sets of 5-minute threshold runs with a 1 minute break, with a 1 minute break in between. So that's 40 minutes of threshold.
And what's your pace
Um,
for these threshold runs? What's your threshold pace?
I'm running them between 3:25 and 3:30. Um, so
Oh
yes.
God, we're such at different levels, man.
Well, mate, yeah, it's not easy. But so that's my first session in the morning, and then I had a couple of mini workouts. I call them like a couple of 10-minute AMRAPs today. Sorry, EMOMs that consist of a lot of different biomechanical movements. So I was hinging, I was doing heavy kettlebell swings for 10 minutes. I did a EMOM, like a push press EMOM. I then did a little unilateral one-legged front front rack step up to lunge workout. I did some core. Um, this is all kind of in the space of maybe 3 hours. I kind of I did my run in the morning, had a break, had some food, did some work, did my sessions during the day, had like two to three mini sessions during the day, had that strength piece, that unilateral strength piece, did some core, had some more food, and then finished off with my second threshold session. Due to the fact that I don't have a race for a while, my second threshold session was just on the rowing machine. And it's pretty much exactly the same structure to my running in the morning, but it's slightly different by rowing. What did I do? 2 minute 30-second rows with 30-second break in between at my rowing threshold pace times 6. So the double threshold method, sometimes it looks like exactly that, but also adding in some high threshold running in the afternoon as well. Um, but um, but yeah, just because I'm not, that will be added in a couple of weeks before Vegas. That's, I guess, a typical day, mate. I get, I think a lot of people think, or I think what I've realized, Pete, and again, only because I've been working with my coach Anthony for quite some time now, is that um, you need to get fitter for the sake of fitness for Hyrox. In all biomechanical movements, in all planes of motion, you need to get stronger in all biomechanical movements as well. Not necessarily look at the sport and look at the stations and go, I need to get better at the sled. I need to get better at the lunges, and just over sled work and over lunge or over wall ball. It's actually training and focusing on each individual aspect and each individual biomechanics of each station and each movement, and go, okay, how can I get more efficient at that?
Mm.
And look, I'll just finish this off by saying, if someone walked into the gym and looked at me, 9 times out of 10, apart from when I'm sweating on the treadmill, they'd go, oh, he looks like he's training for CrossFit. He looks like I'm doing a lot of CrossFit training. I'm doing
Right.
a lot of CrossFit methodology. And I'm okay to say that because it's the truth. Like, so it's interesting, mate. Yeah, it's hard work, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
And that's so you've got two double threshold days during the week. So Tuesday, Thursday are your double threshold days. And then what does the rest of your week look like in terms of training and rest?
So Monday, Wednesday, Friday is a lot of aerobic work and also pure strength work. So Monday, I'm running in the morning. I run 6 days a week. I'm
Wow.
aerobic running Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, and then depending on, again,
When
where I
sorry,
am,
when you say aerobic running, can you explain what you mean?
I'm pretty much going out for a 10K run or a 12K run or a 14K run um, at 5 minute pace. So uh, not for me, not hard at all. So very, very light. Um, and then in the afternoon, I'm still doing some more. I'm doing another aerobic activity to finish off the day, but that could be a bike, that could be an incline hike even. And during the day, I'm hitting some GPPs, some kind of like Metcon style workouts.
What are GPPs?
Some
Sorry.
So general physical preparedness.
And what does that
A
mean?
lot of general physical preparedness is pretty much getting me prepared for the actual race itself generally. So again, looking at the Hyrox race and going, okay, we're pushing the sled, we're pulling the sled, we're pushing again and jumping for the burpees, right? Okay, let's just use those three examples and go, okay, we're not going to do a AMRAP consisting of sled push, sled pull, and plyometric and gymnastics work. We're actually going to get better at those three components by doing a um, a light front squat into a chin up into push-ups and box jumps
Because it's
because
not replicating the movement, but it's practicing a similar style of movement.
it's practicing the same biomechanics that you use for those
Got it.
three implements and those three movements, right? So like that's an example. I do a lot of plyometrics and power movements to get myself prepared for explosive work with the burpees and with the sleds. And that all comes in with the GPPs that I have Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then on top of that, it's the pure strength work that I'm again squatting heavy, deadlifting heavy, push pressing and benching heavy with supersetting of some plyometric work in between.
And are there any rest days?
Sorry, not Friday, Sunday.
Sunday is
Sunday's
your
my rest day.
complete rest day.
Yeah, and I I'm I need a rest day. More so mentally. Um, like I would have the option to actually do something that day if I told my coach I want to do something, he'd give me an active recovery day, which would consist of still going into the gym and doing some active recovery. But for me, I've worked out that I like having that Sunday rest day mentally to just clear myself mentally to just go, okay, let's reset so I can go again Monday morning. Mind you though, like Georgie and I live in the best part of Australia where we can wake up on a Sunday morning again 5:30 and we're out the door for a walk or a bike ride to the local coffee shop and we're at the beach and stuff. So it's not as if we're
In bed all
couch
day doing
potatoes.
nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I
So
mean, for a lot of people, that is active recovery, right? Like just being outdoors,
absolutely,
getting in
definitely.
nature, going for a swim. That is active recovery.
Exactly. Sometimes Georgie wants to go play tennis with me, but I'm reluctant these days because the last the last four times we've played tennis, she's absolutely whooped my ass, mate.
You can
Absolutely.
say now that you're in prep. You're already in prep for the
Oh,
worlds.
exactly. But I tell you what, it's very hard when your girlfriend beats you in tennis, mate.
I've had similar experience, but with squash. We don't play tennis, we
Oh,
play
I bet
squash, and
you
it's
play squash.
yeah. Sometimes it's tough. It's tough to take.
Yeah.
Um, Mate, I love, and I could honestly talk for hours about the details of training because for me, selfishly, it's something I'm incredibly interested in as an ex-pro athlete myself. Very different sports, but still, that was my life. And I still try and make it a big part of my life now. But the reality is, myself and most people who will be listening or watching aren't elite athletes, aren't, you know, going and training all day, every day. They might only have a 1 or 2 hour window a day or every other day to train. So I want to know what your advice would be for someone like myself, who I would say I'm above average in terms of like physical performance. I'm not aiming to get into Hyrox Elite 15. I like competing in Hyrox. I like doing Hyrox, but that is not my main priority year round. I want to be fit. I want to be healthy. I want to feel good. I want my joints to feel good when I'm 50, 60 years old. What type of training would you recommend to someone like myself in that scenario?
I think the first thing I'd say is obviously your aerobic system is the most important. And that's not just running. You can build up a lot of tolerance aerobically, or not tolerance. You can build up your aerobic system by biking and using the rower and the ski erg, and just spending time on it, and just spending time getting out there and running, getting out there and biking, and using the ski and the row. That's the first thing. You can't have too, you can't do too much aerobic work in my eyes. Um, there's always a bigger foundation that you can build. There's always bigger. That's
And
where
when you're
you got to
saying
start.
aerobic, just to be clear, it's it's like the zone 2 training that you hear so much about, right? The stuff that
It's
feels like you
yeah,
could do it for a long time.
correct. It's the feeling of 6 out of 10 effort. It's the feeling that you could, have a chit chat with your mates as well. But you're still breathing a little bit. You're still breathing somewhat, and you are sweating, especially if you live in Hong Kong or Australia. Um, that's that's where you got to start. That's always where you got to start, in my eyes. And then from there, mate, I'm the first to say that you've got to look at every functional um, movement pattern that we do on the daily and try to just be really good at those patterns. And they are the Hyrox stations and what we do on them. Just think about it. I said it before. We push and we pull, and we do that on the daily. We push open a door and we pull open a door every day. Um, and then we can jump. We jump and we can fall over and pick ourselves back up, and then we jump again. Um, One-legged strength is very important. Unilateral strength, and then we carry things. We carry things all the time. And then again we squatting and throwing. Right. Focus on just those functional movements, and you're going to be well-rounded. The Hyrox race is a very well-rounded race, and the athletes that are doing very well are the ones that are as well-rounded as you can be. So start hinging, start squatting heavy, start pulling, start pushing, start doing things one-legged and then one-armed at a time. Don't just do things symmetrical all the time. Start using your torso a lot. Core strength is very important. And I'll just finish off by the statement of try to vary your training as much as possible. The more varied your training can be, the more volume you can potentially build in your training because it's so varied. You're not getting sore, you're not getting complacent, you're not getting bored even. So varying your training is just going to allow you to build that foundation a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think as well as all the physiological advantages you just mentioned, varying your training is like the biggest cheat code to staying motivated and staying in it.
100%.
It's like there's nothing worse. You could have the most motivation in the world, but when you're doing the same Monday session for the 10th week in a row, like, I don't care who you are, your motivation ain't at 100%.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just not. And I know, like for me, whenever I get a new program, I know that feeling of, oh, here we go. Here we go. I'm excited for this new program. And I'll be the first to admit, when I'm now excited to not be in a Hyrox training block,
Yeah,
because I know myself, I really enjoy when I go to the gym and I lift heavy weights. I love going to the gym knowing that I'm strength training, and then I will do my conditioning or running in a different block in the evenings after work. And I really enjoy that split, and I haven't done that split in a long time. So I'm looking forward to going back to that, which I'm doing now. Whereas when it was
awesome.
building up to Hyrox, it was every session that I had in my program seemed to be a hybrid style workout. And I
Mm,
understand the need for them. And when I started the program, I was excited about it. But compound that enough weeks, when I'm waking up at 5 a.m. to go train, the last thing I wanted to do was a Hyrox style workout. I wanted to get ready. I wanted to lift heavy weights. I wanted to feel good before work. And obviously I felt good every time I'd done the session, but motivation wise, I struggled in the end. So the variability of training programs is such a huge thing to keep people in it. And these are
in
people
it.
like not like
Absolutely.
yourself, not like me. Like these are general people who don't maybe aren't used to going to the gym or didn't play team sports growing up. The advice you're giving is very open to the general public of how can you stay in good or get in good shape using maybe the Hyrox movements as a framework.
Correct, man. And like staying in it, what you just said there, staying in it, is so important. And the only way you can do that is to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're not going to be doing it for a long time. Let's just put it that way. So if you are thinking, or if you aren't as motivated with your training right now, or if you're if you're not enjoying it, what's the point?
Mm.
I'll be like, what's the point? I've said this to Georgie for a while. The day that I wake up and go, oh, it's a chore to go to the gym, I'm packing up my boots. I'm saying see you later. And I'll be moving on because there's no point. You've got to enjoy what you're doing, and if you're not going to be doing it for a long time.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's, I guess when you say stuff like that, is a fine balance between not enjoying it in the moment, because I'm sure a lot of mornings, well, I mean, speaking from myself, sometimes you aren't motivated that morning. It doesn't mean you aren't enjoying the process. Like that's just part
Correct.
of it, right? It's when
Yep.
you lose that get up and go for the next competition, like the next training
Definitely.
block. And when you're doing that, then it becomes a pretty tough stage.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's really good advice, and it's good for people to hear like more relatable health and fitness content, right? Because
Mm.
they see you running around, they see these records being set, these championships being won, and it's like, yeah, great, but look at him, look how much he trains. This is his job, this is his life. But that's why Hyrox is great, because you see the thousands of people doing it the next day and the next day. And I saw someone complete a Hyrox in 4 hours in Hong Kong. And that
That's
was
awesome.
a day after you completed it in 56 minutes or whatever it was. And it's
Yeah,
like, come on, man, that's awesome. That's
that's
awesome.
cool.
And, who's to say which one's a bigger achievement? Who's to say? Because it's all subjective.
Oh man, I just loved how you said that because in my eyes, mate, and I'm not just saying this, like, why do I get praise for winning in Hong Kong, like, versus someone like that athlete who did it in 4 hours? As you just said, which one's the biggest achievement? Well, you decide, but also what I'm doing isn't isn't more important than what he's doing. Like, it's not more important. We're doing the same thing. We're actually doing the same thing. I try and have that, in the back of my head every day when I go to the gym that I train at. Even though that there's a lot of, uh, just weekend warriors or even just like daily gym goers that are doing their own routines, not doing it for a living, doesn't mean that I have right or I have more right than they do for that piece of equipment. Or like that doesn't mean that my workout is much more important than what they're doing. No, everyone's doing this exactly the same thing, and that's the best thing about Hyrox. It has created a lot of people to be more engaged with their training because there's a goal at the end of it.
Mm.
And that's the thing that we should be focusing on more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, obviously, you're at the very top end of elite sport, and people love watching elite sport, and that's not going anywhere. In fact, I wanted to talk more about that in the final few minutes, because when I'm looking at Hyrox from the outside, or even from the inside, you could argue, and I said this to Joanna when I spoke to her. In my opinion, she's come into the sport at the perfect time, and it's not her own fault, because she had no question over her being 22 years old. It's a blessing that she's 22, because she's coming and sort of taking over the female side of the sport just as it's really taking off and the money's coming in. People are becoming full-time Hyrox athletes. For someone like yourself and the other athletes who are at the top of the world at the moment, does a part of you wish that you were 10 years younger so that you could really benefit from the takeoff of the sport in the next 10 years?
My first response to that is like, well, yes, but my second response when I think about it a little bit more is, well, I wouldn't have made it 10 years ago, because of who I was back then. I was fit back then. I'm not saying I wasn't fit or I wouldn't have made it due to fitness, but it's come around for me and with me now at the right time as well. And I'm only reaping the rewards because of my maturity now. And I'm okay to say that. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to handle it.
Mm.
I wouldn't have been able to handle what is required, even to the point that I would have been a lot more distracted 10 years ago. And that's the beauty of Joanna, to be completely honest. I'm really proud of her and her maturity at her age to be able to handle this so far. And I have no doubt she'll be able to continue this. But to answer your question, yeah, like it'd be great that if Hyrox was around 10 years ago, but if I think about it, I wouldn't have made it back then.
It's a very mature response and wise response.
Mm,
Um, and I love talking about it because it's obvious to everyone who's heard of Hyrox where this is going. It's a rocket ship. Hopefully, it keeps growing, and the events just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's so many questions that I could ask you. I don't want to take too much of your time, but where do you sort of see what do you think is the goal for Hyrox as a sport? Like, could you ever see it in the Olympics?
oh, mate, wouldn't that be wouldn't that be great? Personally, I'd love that. Um, I think that there could and probably would be one of their goals. And I'm not afraid to say that I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to preach that, or not preach, or trying to, just hint that towards whoever they need to hint that towards. What Pyrox goal? I mean,
Or how can you see the sport evolving,
mm,
if at
mm,
all?
yeah, yeah, and it's a fascinating one, Pete, because we've seen it probably the last year grow so much that you're like, what's it going to be like in 5 years' time if it continues? Um, I personally think that Hyrox doesn't even know. I personally think that if you look at the other sports out there that really had a push right from the word go, and also are sports that are very very similar to ours. Um, CrossFit as a sport, um, versus sorry, just cross versus CrossFit as a methodology, as a lifestyle. Um, Even the whole concept of the triathlon sport and Ironman. Um, I personally think Hyrox should and will be as competitive, and if not more, um, and they probably already are, with the likes of Ironman triathlon and CrossFit. It's a hard one to answer. I personally think that um, I wouldn't be surprised if Hyrox end up creating a varied. Sorry, I wouldn't be surprised if Hyrox create a different race so that they're trying to collect even a different market.
Mm.
Um, and that might be in the next 2 to 3 years. That's what I think. Without answering the question, because I personally don't even really know, mate. I'm kind of riding the wave and seeing where this will take me as well. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if they go, okay, let's make a shorter version so we can attract people that think that 8 kilometers of running is still too much, or do we go do we go the enduro route or
And
route
double it.
and double it, or make it hard, make it
Yeah.
heavier and stuff like that? I think they might end up tweaking a couple of things here and there.
If you could change one thing about the current Hyrox setup, what would it be?
Oh, mate, you're asking my subjective opinion on what would
Well,
I
you can
change
you
so
can
I
tailor
could
it. You can tailor it for your race. Like
tailor it for
Joanna
me.
said, double the running.
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think I personally think that if they do want to make a, mm, I'd change the sleds if I'm completely honest with you.
To what?
And to barbell um heavy work. So it's a little bit more standardized. And I don't want to go into that too much, but I'll just kind of preface that every course is different and it's to do with the sleds,
Yeah,
if
I
I'm
know what you mean.
honest.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And it's not fair. And here's the thing, Pete. I know for a fact that they do their utmost best to keep it as consistent as
Mm,
possible, right? That they actually work, and they're working tirelessly now to try to create something even more consistent right now. So it's not, well, it is their fault, but it's not, if that makes sense.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
But here's the thing: I would change the sled, uh, push to front squats, barbell front squats, 50 barbell front squats at like a moderate like a moderate weight, and then 50 deadlifts, something like that.
Interesting. I
Mm.
like it. I like it. I mean, for me, sleds, I'm a way better at sleds than I am at any barbell
Yeah,
stuff. But
same actually, same. Yeah,
but I love the idea of variation in the races in the future. And yeah, who knows what they're going to do with it? Maybe they don't even know, and they're on a big
yeah,
whiteboard somewhere and they're hashing some stuff out.
absolutely.
Mate, that's what we've got time for today. I want to say a huge thank you for coming on. I know, I mean, just from listening to you, how busy your training schedule is. So thank you for working the time around to fit this in. It's really cool having you on post race, actually, to debrief the race. And me getting super nerdy about it, I could talk about training for hours, and I can tell you could too. So
Yeah,
thank you for giving us the insights into the elite mindset and the elite training programs, but also how the everyday person like myself can benefit from the same sort of mentality and programs as well. So
thanks,
thanks for
Pete.
coming on, mate, and we are rooting for you for the majors coming up, and of course the worlds next year.
Thanks, Pete. And thanks for having me on. And hopefully we see you at another race soon.
Yeah, trying to have a word and get me emceeing in the World Championships.
That's right,
I
man.
can shout. I can
Yeah,
shout you on.
yeah.
All right, mate.
Sounds
Thank
good,
you.
mate. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Abnormal Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to on right now, as it really goes a long way to growing the show. Thank you, and see you in the next one.